Welcome back to the Roundtable. I'm NYJohn. With me today, of course, El Prez and the Capitalists. Before the break, we were already talking about the prelims and how they went for certain teams in Group A. We're going to continue to work our way through Group A until the very bottom, honestly, because all these teams still have a shot. Because everyone, of course, makes it, either the winners or losers. We're on the last team for winners for Group A. That is LGD China, a team that many expected to end up being top 4 in this tournament, but they have not looked their normal selves. They've been dropping games all over the place. They still ended up with a pretty consistent finish. But does anyone have concerns for LGD China outside of me? I mean, I mentioned already, I think Zhao Weight's not playing as well as he used to. But are there any other problems? Siler's still beast mode, but they need more than just Siler to make it through this tournament, honestly. This isn't last year's Dota. You can't throw Morphly in and just roll with it. You have to be a little bit more versatile. What do you think, Capitalist?
It was concerning to me, the fact that LGD almost went down into the lower bracket. Honestly, that was one of the biggest shockers for me. I expected them to really put up a really good showing, and they did make it into the upper bracket, and they're going to have a perfectly good shot at making it all the way here. It was just shocking to me that they did have such a bad group stage. I think they were not prepared whatsoever for some of the Western teams that they had to face up against, that they dropped, a 1-1 game. That teams that normally going into the international, you would have, 90% of people would have said, oh, they're going to 2-0 that team, they're going to 2-0 this team. And it looks like they just were not prepared whatsoever for some of their Western counterparts. And I don't know how their boot camping went. Maybe they focused a little bit too much on, some of the Eastern teams, some of their rivals like IG, but they just came out the gate and were not looking good whatsoever. Day one was really disappointing, but still they made it to the upper bracket. That's the important part. You don't have nearly as much pressure, and now they're going to be able to see if they can move on and take on, I can't remember who they're taking on right now, but they're going to be able to have a good shot at staying in the upper bracket, at least a good long way. And let's not forget that LGD did last time drop down and make a very strong showing in TI2. So I think they're a team that does perform well under, land pressure, and that's going to be a big factor, honestly. You've got some inexperienced teams. While the playing field is very level, land experience is a very, very important part of this, and LGD does have some of that to spare. And so it's definitely a big pro in their favor, and honestly, I'm expecting them to be in top 4, even though with their poor showing in the group stage.
Yeah, El Prez, the things that we hear about Chinese Dota, of course, they're better at best of 3s, so making it up to that winner bracket, it's going to definitely suit LGD to an extent. Do you think LGD are looking a little bit wishy-washy? It seems like they're playing last year's Dota to some extent. They're still using heroes like Tidehunter. They're using a lot of Magnus, who we don't see as much from Western teams anymore. Are they dated a little bit with their team picks, or are they still really solid overall?
Well, I still think it's very solid overall, to be honest. We are seeing that they are using older heroes like Magnus, who lost a lot of popularity after the Battlecrow nerfs as well as the RP nerfs. Tide, I was actually surprised when he fell out of the scene because nothing really changed about him. So that was interesting to me. But that said, I don't think hero picks are necessarily going to be the reason why they get dropped out. All of these heroes are still very good and, given the right circumstances, absolutely game-changing. So I don't think that's going to be the biggest issue for them. If anything, it's going to be really the kind of competition they were facing. I don't think they were really expecting to go up against a Fnatic that was in this kind of form, right? That was definitely probably a big shock to the majority of teams that were coming into this tournament. That said, they do stand a very good chance of getting pretty far in the tournament. But then they also have Alliance as their first opponent in the winner's bracket, so yeah. It's going to be a very tough ride for LGD China.
Yeah, they're really going to have to be in it for the long haul, it seems, right now. Let's go ahead and look at the team that, of course, LGD China tied with Dignitas at the end of the group stage. Dignitas being the biggest surprise, bar none, in the International 3 thus far. They came into this tournament dropping out of every major tournament in the Western world and then ended up boosting an 8-6 record. Right now we're looking at Dignitas in this tiebreaker match. Snaking just dives into the Roche pit. This is when Dignitas had a lead. There's a skewer and an RP, and the team just goes down with him. This is a huge fault for Dignitas. They could have been in the winner's bracket if they had just kept the ship sailing the right direction in this game, because they were doing really well early on here. Before that fight, of course, a kill lead, 7-6, and a pretty good gold lead. That's a fight they took without having Universe on his Darkseer, one of his most famed heroes, and they ended up dropping because of it. Do you think that perhaps Dignitas, even though they're playing better, are still victim to bad habits from time to time in this competition thus far? Anybody?
Absolutely. I think Dignitas, they're a really young team. They are very, I mean, player-wise and as a team as a whole, they are very, very new to the Dota scene. You've got some veterans there, but as a team, they still have a lot of things they have to work out. I think Fogged has done a really amazing job with the leadership he's provided, and their boot camping. Obviously, something went incredibly right, but I think a big factor was that a lot of teams wrote them off. Just going into the international, no one was expecting, oh yeah, Dignitas, they're going to have a chance at the upper bracket. And no, nobody was calling that, just because they were floundering so heavily beforehand, and it seemed like they were going into the international really unprepared. So I'm really proud of them. I'm proud of the fact that they were able to at least make a shot towards that upper bracket. I think they will go decently far, but I think they have a lot of room to grow as a team, and maybe TI4 is going to be a better bet for them, but we'll have to see. I mean, they are a team that nobody has really been looking at. When a big part of your boot camping is not only just practicing and scrimming against some of the other teams, but also going through replays and talking about them and examining team by team, what strategies are they good at, what are their strengths, what are their weaknesses, what can we exploit about that team. And I think Dignitas is one of those teams that, yeah, I mean, it's obviously their job, they're going to be looking at them, but not spending as much time as, say, Na'Vi and Alliance. Those are the giants that everybody's looking at on the Eastern scene. So I think they came into the group stage, they surprised people, but I think that surprise is gone now. People are looking at Dignitas much more seriously, and today, those teams are going to have to, that might have to face Dignitas in the lower brackets in round 1, round 2, they're going to be looking very, very hard at that team and finding out some of those strengths and weaknesses, and that surprise factor is going to be completely gone for them.
Yeah, I think you brought up some good points there, but we did start with a negative. I mean, of course, along the way, Dignitas 2-0'd LGD, a huge result for them. I mean, they were never playing consistently over the summer. We heard that their boot camp went really poorly. They had a 20 days with no real internet connection, so it was frustrating for them. I remember seeing AUI 2000 in games complaining about 30% packet loss in some instances, which is really unbearable to try and play with. So they go and they rotate to a LAN center, I believe, and they play there for 7 days. This is a 7-day boot camp, 8-6 in this competition already. El Press, what does it say about the resiliency of Dignitas as a squad?
Well, one thing I always thought about Dignitas as a team was that they definitely had a very upbeat attitude. Even when they were back at bottom and they were losing lots of games, they were still really working towards progressing as individual players, and they've definitely come a really long way since being picked up by Dignitas. And I think they're definitely a very strong team. They still have some of those weaknesses. Their strategy tends to really revolve around Aoi getting really farmed, and if he doesn't, their late game tends to fall apart, and that's basically why most teams tend to exploit their mid-game weakness, where Aoi is not quite large, but, like Universe isn't capable of making huge plays yet either. So, I don't know. That said, Dignitas definitely seems really strong. I do think it was a large part because no one was really expecting them to play this well coming out of the gate, especially after the really weak summer sessions with lag, and as a large part about poor connections and such. But yeah, I think Dignitas is looking to still be very strong, especially in the losers bracket. I think they're sending to at least take maybe a couple more matches there, and I don't know if they're going to make it all the way, just because the losers bracket is going to be that tough to get out of by virtue of its design. But I do think they're capable of getting pretty far out.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think there's a lot of potential for Dignitas, and of course, we'll be previewing all of those matchups later on the show, so be sure to stick with us for the long haul, and you'll get to see what we believe is going to occur once we get to the actual playoff stages, which start tomorrow. So everyone's really hyped up on that. But let's keep going through the groups. Let's look at the next team on the list. We do see under Dignitas is Zenith, and then we'll kind of lop all these teams together and get the impressions, because these are teams that had underwhelming performances in general. Zenith had pretty high expectations. I mean, they took on Yamate from formerly on Orange, I believe. And of course, that was in place of HYHY, who retired and then moved to a different game eventually. A lot of people thought that Zenith was a team that could compete. They would be top 8 potentially. They're starting off in the lower brackets. We also see Mouse and, of course, MUFC, who were unable to pick up a single win in this tournament. A little bit of a different story, of course. Mouse picked up a couple of victories, 2 of those against MUFC, though. So, I mean, you have to wonder, maybe they didn't do enough over the summer to prepare. I think they don't diversify their strategies enough, because we've seen a lot of teams break out new heroes. Mouse are kind of cut and dry in terms of what you can predict out of them and what heroes they're going to play. Maybe that's an issue for them. And, of course, MUFC, just nothing has gone right. And I mean, you feel for them to an extent because they are one of the Southeast Asian representatives and a region that loves Dota. I mean, they are fanatics about Dota, and seriously, not coming into this competition doing not coming in doing well, coming in and doing poorly. Either way, it's just a real disappointment to see because you'd love to see SEA represented well. Orange is going to try and hold the flag for them. We'll get to that group later. Let's just get general thoughts on Zenith, MOUZ, and MUFC as a grouping, really. What do you think, Capitalist? Did you have high expectations for any of these teams coming in, or maybe they're right where you expected them?
You know, honestly, they're pretty much where I expected them. I didn't expect MUFC to do very well. It is a little shocking that they didn't pick up a single game in the group stage. MOUZ did a little bit worse to my expectations. You know, I thought with their addition of Cinderin that they were going to make a strong showing and possibly make a play for that upper bracket, but I think that would have been kind of a stretch. And Zenith is definitely, you know, I think they're a strong team, and maybe the group stages, they just weren't really feeling it. I think they are going to be a very strong lower bracket contender. Best of threes, I think they do have a bit of an advantage there. They
best
are,
of ones, lower bracket, of course.
Oh, that's right.
Best of ones for the first couple rounds, which might even give them more of an advantage. I mean, Ice, he is wild. You don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, normally I would play to their experience, and I want longer games for them, but I don't know. It's best of ones are always just so risky.
Yeah.
I do think they are going to be a strong contender, but I don't know. We'll have to see. It's just I don't think they've clicked as a team together. Like you said, they don't have a whole lot of they don't really draft out a whole lot besides what they're trapped in. Just like MOUZ, they're the SEA equivalent, I think, in a lot of ways to MOUZ, and the fact that they draft normally the same things, they play to their strength, but they're very much a team that you're able to counter draft to. And I think that's a big weakness to them. I think that they need a little bit more time. I think a lot of teams are coming in. A lot of the teams that are in the lower bracket are there because they don't have enough experience yet. And if they stick together, we're definitely going to see them do well in another year. But for right now, I think that as a team, I think they still need a lot of teamwork that they're just missing out on.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a good point to bring up as well that MUFC are from SEA. And if you think about SEA teams this year, I mean, of course, Orange is the one that you primarily consider the best. But looking beyond that, it's an off year for Mineski. Myth Trust had an off year as well. We don't see familiar faces like Sharky and Trunks around anymore. So it really is, you're a byproduct of your area to an extent, of course. North America gets to play Europe very frequently, but if you're an SEA, you have to compete with not only SEA, but Chinese teams to try and make it into the big tournaments. So it's really a burden, and honestly, they're going to need to build up their player base, just like America needs to build up its own player base to try and just create better and better teams to kind of work off of each other. So I think that's another good point for MUFC, considering how poorly they've done in this tournament. That can definitely be one of the reasons. Elprez, do you have any surprising notions, anything about these bottom three in particular?
Well, personally, if I had to guess the top four for Group A, I would have changed Fnatic with MOUZ. I thought, execution-wise, MOUZ is generally a little bit more consistent than Fnatic, so that's why I would have put them there normally. That says, MOUZ was really underperforming this tournament. We didn't really see like Vata making all of the big game-changing plays that he normally does. Black was still farming okay. I think he had the highest average GPM out of any player so far. So, you know, it's like he's not playing poorly, but I do think it comes down to the fact that MOUZ is notorious for basically 4 protect 1 style of play, and they definitely stuck to that through this tournament, and that's definitely very exploitable because if you create a strong 5-man lineup against MOUZ, they're gonna crumble.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Black hasn't done anything wrong. I mean, he's still been playing his game. He probably has the highest GPM. I didn't actually look up statistics. But, I mean, if your other heroes aren't hitting hard, we've seen teams constantly lose because they just get beaten in the laning phase. I mean, that's how Liquid won its 7 games, is because they won the laning phase. It's so important to have a full game strategy and to be able to diversify because lots of teams are catering bans too. That's been a big theme of this tournament. They're picking off 1 or 2 heroes that are specific for the team they're playing. There's no general bans anymore. It's not automatically Wisp and Batrider plus maybe Lifestealer and a Gyrocopter. It's specific for teams, and it really has punished a lot of teams along the way that want to stick with their familiar strategies. And definitely these bottom 3 are no exception to that condition. So that is it for Group A. We can actually move on to Group B now and start discussing that. And of course, Group B, the top team in the world right now, Alliance. I mean, guys, there's not much to really fault them on. There was one game against Tongfu, but we'll have to talk about that after the break. So be sure to stick with us so we can preview Group B for you after this break, and it's going to be amazing. We get to talk about Alliance and that huge game against Tongfu where Tongfu almost beat Goliath, but not quite.